It's time to play Sociology 1 once again. Just a housekeeping note, your midterms are graded, and we're going to give them back to you at the end of the hour today, or hour and 15 minutes, whatever we are. And that's the way to work. And if I forget to tell you, they're going to be lined up by TA, and your TA will be standing next to the appropriate exams to give back. So just look for the TA's body, and except Hassan, because Hassan is recovering from surgery and is not here today, but his exams are. And we'll figure out how that's going to work when the time comes. So what you're being handed out now is just to get ready. I'm going to talk in a little while about Mitchell Denier's book, Sidewalk, and in particular the chapter that he calls Talking to Women. And you're getting right here a transcript of that conversation. And in a little while in lecture, I'm going to play you the transcript. I'm going to play you the audio recording of the actual conversation between the Mitchell Denier and the man and the woman. And I've given out all of mine, so I can't even follow it with you. So I'm going to say to Zalman, hold on to one copy for me, okay? Because I have to lecture up here and I don't have a copy. There's two different sheets, right? Right. Okay, yeah, and help out each other, and hopefully we have enough. If we don't have enough, you'll share, because that's a nice thing to do. Okay, why don't we do that now then, while we're sort of discombobulated? Does raise your hand if you don't have two sheets? Oh dear. Okay, hands down. Raise your hand if you either don't have two sheets or you're not sitting next to someone who does have two sheets. Raise your hand. Okay. Right. So the people on this side, every other person, we're asking for spare sheets, okay? So if you have someone you can be looking at their sheet, pass your sheet this way so that the extras accumulate on this side of the room. Thank you so much. And I don't have the other sheet. Okay. Is it happening? Okay. Now, who doesn't either have two sheets, or who lacks access to two sheets? Raise your hand. Okay. Now I'm going to ask the same wonderful benevolent behavior. If you have an extra sheet because you're sitting next to someone who has a sheet, pass them back. And keep doing that. Keep doing that. If you're sitting next to someone, or if you would move next to someone, that's it. Someone who has two sheets, and is someone you want to sit next to. Okay? So you can move your seat to sit next to someone with two sheets. I almost said the other S word, didn't I? It's all a trick. Okay, now who doesn't have access to two sheets? Okay, what? You should have two different sheets. It doesn't matter. Yeah, send both back if you have access to, like this nice young man's going to let you see his sheets. Right, and whoever doesn't have sheets is going to listen very hard to the audio. So, okay, I think we're rolling toward comprehensive access. And you should only be so lucky with your health care. Let's hope for that too. Although that's less within my power. Okay, so let's get going. And what we've been talking about the last few sessions, don't be reading these so-called sheets until I tell you to, okay? So what we've been talking about in lecture, of course, is gender, and that's the kinds of things that we're reading about as well. And one of the points that I've been trying to make is the idea of separation, that we live in a world of separations of men and women, and that is a massive phenomenon with all sorts of consequences. But I want you to think about it as we go through today's talk, as well as when you do your readings, that you can apply it to other things as well. So it's about social separation, and it's about the way in which separation also works with hierarchy and inequality. So when you make things separate, you also have the potential, at least, of making things unequal. And when you make things unequal, then you have to think about how you go about doing reform, or at least some people like to think that that's wrong and we need to reform and do something about the inequality. And that opens up many options of how to go about dealing with inequality, or what one thinks is an illegitimate set of separations and the consequences of those separations. So that's always something to be looking at. What is being separated and what isn't? By what criteria are things being separated? What are the consequences of that separation in terms of delivering unequal opportunities to individuals, and what should be done about it? And we are examining all of that in the context of gender. So one of the things that I wanted to do is give you a classic rendition of gender separation, and that really amplifies and dramatizes, and also is very funny, of how these separate spheres work. And many of you, all of you, probably know the television series I Love Lucy. It's one of the most popular series we've ever had. And in the I Love Lucy program, Lucille Ball lives in, for many, 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 many years of television viewing. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz live in a 3-room apartment in New York, and it is her job to take care of the 3-room apartment. And that is basically all her job is. At one point in the show, she has a child, and then she has something else to do, which is to take care of the little boy. But ordinarily, that's her job, is to stay home with the baby, or not the baby. And this is considered to be an excellent role for women. It is an exalted role for women. The woman is on the pedestal. That idea that this is such an exalted role for women came to be challenged. And Betty Friedan, Friedan, who's often considered the founding voice of the contemporary feminism in the United States, Betty Friedan wrote a book called The Feminine. Betty Friedan talked about, in a book called The Feminine Mystique, she talked about what she called the problem with no name. That is, why is it that women, like Lucille Ball in that situation, are actually not so happy with being on a pedestal? And the answer is that they don't have dignity. That they are, she didn't use the language, but now you have heard about a lot of these phenomena, that they can't get in a word edgewise. That's not what Betty Friedan said. That they can't get rewarded with active participation in the labor force in a way that they can be autonomous and independent. That this being separate, even if in income it looks like it's equal, and it kind of is, that is indeed a problem. And Betty Friedan said it's the problem with no name. And the name she kind of gives it is sexism. And the solution is feminism. Another way of putting it in the context of this class is that Betty Friedan was trying to deliver to women the sociological imagination. That is, you're at home, you're unhappy, you cry a lot, people can't figure out why you're crying. If you've got it so good, here's the answer. The structure of the society is such that your capacities for dignity and fulfillment are being limited by the way the thing is separates you out from one role as opposed to the other. The media reinforce this. They're not the only source, but they certainly do reinforce it. And to help jog your memories, I'll play you one of the classic comedy scenes of all time. In program after program, the plot line is that Lucy is trying to do something in the world. She wants to start a band, she wants to be an artist, and in this one, which is a role switch, she gets to go to work with her friend Ethel, and the men, the husbands, take care of the house, and their job is to make the meals. Now, the men completely screw up the meals and turn the kitchen into complete bedlam, and you're not going to see that. And Lucy and Ethel go into the job market. They're not equipped, and they can't get any of the jobs they apply for, but they do get this job working in the chocolate in the candy factory, and that's what you're seeing.
Conveyor belt and continue into the next room where the girls will pack it. Now your job is to take each piece of candy and wrap it in one of these papers and then put it back on the belt. You understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Let her roll! Let her roll! Well, wait here. Somebody's asleep at the switch.
What are you doing up here? I thought you were downstairs boxing chocolates.
Oh, they kicked me out of there fast.
Why?
I kept pinching them to see what kind they were. This is the 4th department I've been in.
Oh, I didn't do so well either. No.
All right, girls. Now, this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Yes, ma'am.
Let her roll!
Oh, this is easier.
Yeah, we can handle this okay.
So it's very funny for us today, but it was tragic in its moment. No, it was always very funny. And I don't know if you've noticed a couple of things. Well, what did you notice about it? Any observations you'd care to make? Yes. Yes, when the lady was very strict at the beginning, Lucille Ball said to her, "Yes, sir." And so what we see is the interpretation of what a woman who works is like, which is the boss woman, who is odious, a certain kind of woman, not a genuine woman, not a woman who corresponds to women's ways in the way that Goffman or West and Zimmerman and other people will talk about how women should be. And so it works with that stereotype and, to some degree, reality of the difference between men and women. The other thing, of course, is that it's produced at a time when a significant portion of the workforce was women. And this ideal or notion of separate spheres was a fiction because a large proportion of working class women did work. And indeed, that factory, in a job like wrapping the chocolates, would have been done completely by women. And so only these women can't do the job of wrapping the chocolates. And that takes us to social class, which is also part of the story of what's going on. So, just like West and Zimmerman, also Deborah Tannen writes about the fact that not only do women have different access, different capacities to make a subject, to continue to talk, but the substance of their talk is different The style of their talk is different. And Tannen says that whereas men give reports, that is, men speak of the state of the world, and that's the way they tend to talk with each other. Klasutsky hit a homer. He's the third best ever in baseball history, and they give reports. A lot of women's conversation is rapport. Instead of report, it's rapport. And it's helping to people to understand what each other are talking about, helping to get a situation going, helping to coordinate behavior. They do rapport rather than report. Anyway, that's a distinction that she makes. Well, as I said last time, that all this is taking place under circumstances of biological difference. And we don't want to completely not recognize that there are biological differences between what we conventionally call men and what we conventionally call women. And there is a very high correlation between those two labels and what's going on in biological terms by some biological criteria, although not all, since height, strength, and other things are mere correlations rather than strict indications of differences. But we do know that in part because of biological differences, when women go to the restroom compared to men, different behaviors in fact occur. And you're reading about that this semester, and I spoke a little bit about it as well. And it won't be news to you that women indeed pee sitting down, and men don't that often, although they sometimes do exactly that. What I've learned in talking to women, especially women in my classes, what I've learned is that actually a lot of women, I think probably most women, do not pee sitting down. They pee while hovering. That is, they hold their bodies over the toilet and rather than make physical contact, at least in public restrooms, because of the fact of their anxiety about what they might touch. And this is another way in which women live with a set of issues that men don't live with, men at least who urinate standing up and in their urination procedures. Women have other physiological differences, such as they menstruate, and men don't, which requires them to be spending time in the bathroom and to have access to certain kinds of equipment and cleansing apparatuses that men don't have to deal with. There's also, as I indicate, at least the allegation, and I don't think it'd be so terrible to acknowledge it as probably true, that women, in part because they have longer hair, in part because they are wear more complex clothing, spend more time in the restroom, primping and setting themselves up, using that backstage effectively, including to do solidarity with other women or to exchange tips on how to comb hair, how to fix one's body for then going out and the next realm of the world. So what is the result of all of this? Well, you know the result because you see it very frequently, not 100% of the time, but we all see it very frequently, which is that there is a long line at the women's room when there is no line at the men's room. And we have to ask what is the cause of that and what can we do about it? Well, the cause of it is that women's rooms are fewer in number than men's rooms, at least historically. For example, the United States Senate had, did I talk about that in this class? Yeah, I did. That there were no women's rooms and then they were in fact far away. There's always the possibility then of making changes by adding access to women, by having more women's rooms. There is, though, still the problem that because women need more space as a group to fulfill their bodily functions, they need to have a larger amount of space. And so it is not appropriate to divide up space equally between men and women, that you must provide more space to women as a group than to men as a group if there is to be equality for the individual women compared to the individual men. And that issue of providing unequal resources to groups is the basis of affirmative action. That is, in order to provide equal opportunity for individuals, you have to provide unequal opportunity to groups. And so if we go back to the idea of who gets into the best colleges in the United States, you would then start saying, oh, what we've got to do is provide unequal access to groups. Like poor people, for example, have to get much more of an equal shot at getting into Harvard, Princeton, and Yale than people who are from affluent families. That's the only way there will be actual equal opportunity to, for example, participate in that. One of the other mechanisms is, of course, for women to take over men's rooms. And we have all probably been in those kinds of settings where that does occasionally happen. But it's very rare in my experience that women see the long line and are in the long line at the women's room, see no line in the men's room, and then just go into the men's room and use it. And after all, and speaking for myself, I would rather go into a room of the opposite gender or the alternative gender, as is more appropriate to put it, and risk the social oddness of it than to continue to stand there. But we see the power of conformity to gender classification by the fact that it is so unusual to see women actually go into the men's room. There is no threat under those circumstances. The possibility of violence is, I think, extremely low, and in that kind of crowded situation, and yet we see that it is relatively rare. The other thing that could be a solution is something that's done at PS1. Do you know what PS1 is? Public stands for Public School 1, and it's a branch of the Museum of Modern Art in Queens. I recommend it to you very, very highly. It's a terrific, terrific place, and it's in an old school. And what they simply did is just took the doors off the bathrooms. So there were boys' bathrooms and I suppose girls' bathrooms. I don't know for sure. But anyway, they just took the doors off. And now everything is anybody goes in anywhere they want to go. And so you don't need a building permit. You don't need to do anything vis-a-vis the authorities. You just simply take the door off. And that seems to be going okay. So one of the things that you can do, therefore, is to acknowledge the difference between men and women and figure out some way of getting to this equality of individual opportunity while leaving things either still separate by providing more space to women for their women's rooms, or eliminate distinction completely with certain social hazards that might imply, but that would be the other route. Now, to just move this beyond the public restroom, but keeping in mind some of the lessons learned from the public restroom, then we have other social realms where this can be thought about. So one of the things that sociologists have learned is that with all of these changes in women entering the labor force, which is now massive, that is, a majority of middle-class women, just like working-class women used to, now the majority of middle-class women also work. A majority of mothers of small children also work. So we now have women in the workforce in large numbers. Even for women who are married to husbands, as well as paired up in partnerships, domestic partnerships, we learn that it is still the case that women not only work, but they also bear the greater burden of taking care of the children. So it's the women who, more than the men, change the diapers, see about the school, and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and all the other stuff that children do, sports, delivering children, picking them up. It's the mothers, the women, who still carry that load, and it's sometimes called by sociologists the double shift, that women are both working in the formal labor market as well as working at home, for which they are not compensated. So a way to deal with the double shift is for the husbands to change. You could, for example, say, well, no, the women should work harder, like Lucy in the chocolate factory, speed it up. That's your job. Let's get on with it because it goes with your biology. You had these babies. You are more nurturing as your hormonal system allegedly dictates, and as you're giving birth dictates, and as the historic role of women dictates as linked to all those biological criteria. So now you work. You wanted, Betty Friedan wanted you to have all of these new avenues for your life as modes of fulfillment. Okay, now you got it, and do it. That's what you wanted, now you do it. The alternative is to reorganize the social relations in the way I talked about reorganizing the bathrooms. And that is that the men do more. And that's now a change in what men are used to. Just now, so it may mean in the bathrooms that men will have less space than women, and now men will have to stand in line to an equal degree that women stand in line as a way to give equal pleasures and resources and capacities to both groups. We need to reorganize the social arrangement just like we would otherwise rearrange the bathroom arrangement. Or we could take something like a more radical role, which is we don't have men's or women's rooms anymore, as with the example of just taking the doors off, all the men's rooms and women's rooms and all the signs, and just let people go out and make the best of it, see how they do. Or when it comes to, for example, childcare, we could reorganize it and have it be that neither mother or father is responsible for childcare, at least in its totality. And it becomes the job of the village. As Hillary Clinton said many years ago, it takes a village. Well, literally, then let's turn it over to the village. And the model we have for that are in an earlier phase, I think it may still remain in remnants, is in Israel, the kibbutzim, the socialist settlements of Israel, in which child rearing was thought to be a community job. And so children, in effect, it depends on which kibbutz we're talking about and how radical was their interpretation, but that the community raises the children in nurseries that the children are at, sometimes from sunup until bedtime, sometimes, I think, around the clock. And that's the way that problem is addressed. It's by society taking over the jobs altogether. And in this country, it would, at a more moderate level, it means things like child care facilities for babies, beginning at very early on, and all day, all evening, whatever. But adding that in as a way of dealing with this double shift that women otherwise have laid on them. So let's go to a very different scene, and that scene is gender relations on the streets of New York, on 6th Avenue in particular. I don't think I've done this survey in the class, but one of the things that happens in the city is that men call out to women. And in the book Sidewalk, Mitch Denier makes much of the fact that that does go on 6th Avenue, and it goes on among his guys, the men who sell things on the street, to the women who pass by. So have we had the survey yet of how often this happens to you? No. Okay, so this is always an interesting learning experience. Think about the last month, women of Sochwan, just the women. I want you to think about the last month, and I'm going to ask you whether or not someone has called out to you that you didn't know, a stranger, in a way that you did not initiate, and came at you in a way you didn't invite. So now the survey will begin. Would you raise your hand if that's happened to you in the last month? Okay, now this is always an interesting learning experience. Okay, now put your hands down. In the last week. Okay, I want the gentleman especially to watch. Okay, thank you very much. How about today? Okay, we're off. It's just morning, but the day is coming. So what we see is that this is a very, very massive phenomenon that Mitchell Denier has just gotten a handle a bit of. Oh, why don't we ask it for the men of Sochwan? The same question. How many have had that experience of a comment coming at you from someone you didn't know, and that it was sort of parallel to the comments of the women? They're not yelling out, watch out, you're going to be hit by a car, or in New York, hey motherfucker, get out of my way. Okay. Instead, it's the kind of parallel comment that to the ones that women get, like, hey man, I love your legs. Okay? Now, how many of the gentlemen in the room have had that experience in the last, how did I begin this thing? Last month. The last month. I've got, no, I don't have one. I do have one? Oh, okay, I got one. Do I have another one? Can I ask, was it from a man or a woman? It was from a man. Okay, great. So it can happen. It can happen, but as you saw, it's very rare. And again, it was from a man, which I think is the more common way in which this thing tends to unfold. We saw that when I asked about how often does it happen to women in the last month, I got, I don't know, 97%. It held up. I got a way strong majority in the last week, and then I got a sprinkling for this morning, even though we're only, well, many of you may have just rolled out of bed in the dorm around the corner and still managed to get a call at you. Well, what you have in front of you are two different versions of the interaction that went on 6th Avenue between Mitch, Laura, and Keith. Mitch is, of course, Mitchell Denier. Laura is a youngish white woman who is walking by, and she's walking her dog. And Keith is one of the vendors who works on the streets, who is the basis of Mitch Denier's book. And what we see here is an illustration of a more general phenomenon. Sociologists have written about the idea that some people are more open persons and then are other people. What's an open person? Like an open store. Irving Goffman is the one who talks about this way. You can walk up to a dog in the city. Anybody can walk up to a dog and talk to the dog. And that is not considered offensive to other people who see it. It's not offensive to the dog owner. In fact, the dog owner may think that's a good thing. And so you can walk up to a dog and say, oh, cute, cutie, booty, whatever you want. And you might even, and you can stare at the dog all you want. And then, depending upon how ferocious the dog seems to be or not to be, you might take a glance at the owner, or you may not, and you may start touching the dog. So the dog is an open person. A child is next in order. So if there is a child, you can go near the child. If the child is with their caregiver, their caretaker, their mother or their nanny or whatever, and you can say, how cute. And you can even then start the routine of, oh, where'd you get that pretty little bonnet? And aren't you a little cute little girl? I love your little bonnet. Aren't you a real boy? The way you're hitting the side of your carriage. Man, he's a rough customer, huh? And then it would be a little bit further along the way to touch the child in the presence of the caregiver. that would start maybe getting into some dangerous territory. But you could kind of, if you won some acceptance and the person started to indicate that it was okay, you could touch the person, the human being, the child. Next in order are women. And so what happens with women is that compared to men, they are open, at least to men. And so men think relatively nothing of, or at least some men, a good number of men, as the hands that went up in the room indicate, that a good number of men think of women as kind of like dogs. They go by and you can say, hey baby, I like the way you swing it. Hey honey, are you married? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we could have a really interesting time if I asked the women in the room to report to us the last quote the last 5 people who called out to them and what it was, the content of those comments. So women then are open people. It's harder to, unlike a dog, to get a hold of a woman and touch the woman. That is a little bit rough. And in fact, the whole issue of the right of men to touch women has been one that has filled the doctrine of feminism, or has been part of it, because it used to be much more easy for a man to touch a woman, for a professor, for example, to touch a female undergraduate, and in various ways. And that is much more forbidden now. So there's been a shift in history, thanks in part to feminism, of the right of men to touch women in the way that an open person would be, for example, touchable. And that's a sensitive, and where that boundary is very tender. And for example, as members of the faculty, I think we are very aware of it. In other realms, sexual harassment and unwelcome touching is a set of issues in workplaces that it didn't used to be. And women were much more touchable, and touchable on whim of the men. In other words, like a dog. So we have a hierarchy then of openness and who's open for business just in principle. And dogs are the most open, and children are next, and women then follow, and men are least available. And that's why the men who call out to the women, with rare exceptions, do not call out to men. Rare exceptions. And that women don't very often call out to women or to men either. And I would guess empirically that the women who gave their reports will report that they have had many such calls out from men, and very few, if any, calls out from other women. So what we're going to do is listen to the actual tape, if the gods of video are with us, of this conversation between that you see in front of you. And first of all, you have access to the conversation as it unfolds without all the fancy transcribing techniques that Dunier carried out with his co-author, someone who is much more familiar with this technique of what's called conversation analysis, to show the silences and how those silences work. As you know from the reading, but which I'll just repeat for those of you who perhaps haven't had a chance to get to the readings yet, silences count for a lot, because silences, which are indicated on your sheets in tenths of a second, are noticeable. So 1.0 means 1 second, 0.8 means 8/10 of a second, and as little as 0.2 seconds is recorded. That's a really fraction of a second. At the level of 0.3, people will notice that that's 1 second. Did you hear my pause just now? There's another one. That's 1 second. It is clearly noticeable to you. And when people are talking, they rarely have those kinds of interruptions or those kinds of silences, except when they are meaningful silences. And these are meaningful silences. So I invite you to follow either sheet that you want, because the audio is not strong. Because this happened, this recording was made on 6th Avenue. You'll hear the street traffic. You'll hear a lot of the stuff going on. But you'll also hear Dunir, Laura, and Keith in conversation as Keith starts petting the dog, then gets the dog. And when he has the dog, he's got the woman. And the woman is continuously trying to end the conversation. And you can see that by the silences, as well as many other things that you can see. When someone wants to end a conversation, what they typically do is become silent. And that means it's time to go. And the other person says, well, which is a kind of silence. They call it, the people who do this kind of work, speech particles. Somebody says, well, and the other person says, yeah. And that's the way you end your phone conversations, by the way. Notice that next time you're in that kind of in any conversation. The way you end it is by displaying a waste of time. And now that means there's nothing more to say. Even though there's always infinite more to say. You go, or you're just silent, and then the other person gets it and says, I guess you're busy now. I guess you got to go. But here, she's doing that constantly. He is inventing new subjects and opening up conversation in every way he can. And there are other ways you do that you can keep a conversation going when the other person doesn't want it. One is you ask a question, because massively when people ask a question, somebody else gives an answer, even if the answer is, I don't know. But one turn gets the next turn. And the other is a compliment. And that's why it's, hey, baby, I like your legs. Hey, baby, I like your legs. And hoping you will say, thanks, or something like that. And of course, it often doesn't work. But your best shot at getting an interaction going with someone who doesn't want to interact with you is to ask a question or give a compliment. And the people who are eager for that to happen do it. She asks him no questions, and she gives him no compliments. So here we go.
This is Daisy, right?
This is Daisy, right?
How old is Daisy? I miss you. Oh, my baby, no. Push me.
With line 10.
Okay. Get up, man. Get up, fool. Oh, that's better?
Line 16.
Look at her. Like she's a leopard in a tree or something. How old is Daisy?
Mitch asks, she
She a
answers
boyfriend?
right away.
She likes younger
They ran
men.
into each other tonight for the first time.
And he's big as an ox.
She's very happy.
He's big as an ox. He's what, 5 months old?
6.
6? And he's like this much bigger than her. She's like, oh, what a man.
He's the pioneer. He's out there.
Owen.
Yes.
But you can't make me no grandpa. That's my baby here.
Woo. Come on. Baby dog. Hey. Come.
Drop the leash for me and walk away. I want to do it out.
Yeah. You know I can't. I'm not going to drop my leash.
Where you going? Where you going? Can't wait till I get... Can't wiggle down like a snake. Can't wait till I get rich. See you later, baby.
So,
This is Daisy, right?
I love listening to
I love
it.
that.
Enough is enough.
I miss you.
So, I just wanted you to actually hear, because you're spending a lot of time with that book, I wanted you to actually hear what the voices sound like and what that interaction is like. But I want to emphasize when the last part of the conversation, where in line 50, Keith says, "Drop the leash for a minute, walk away. I want to see what Hap," and right on while he's still talking, she interrupts. So here she's been very reluctant to speak to him, and that's why you see all those silences on her part as then Keith issues one comment after another, and she is very reluctant to reciprocate. Except when she talks to Mitch. And now on line 50, "Drop the leash for a minute, walk away. I want to see what Hap." And now she says, "No, you know I can't. I'm not going to drop my leash." So we have a very serious thing going on. She does something that is a clear interruption of another person's speech. And that kind of thing is rude. That's a heavy move to make. And she's been, my interpretation, driven to make that move because at this point, she's getting anxious. He's got the dog, and he is suggesting that she drop the leash, which will then give him the dog in a quasi-permanent way. And now she really is going to be up the creek. And of course, she's worried about the dog. They're on 6th Avenue. There's traffic and all that sort of thing. So it shows the way in which this process works. So what is this process when I say this process works? Well, in a way, it's the same process I've been talking about human interaction and about gender relations. But in this case, it's about gender relations where the social class is also playing in and where race is also playing in. And that then is complicating the story quite a bit. I know I did talk about the idea that when the doctor, and you're reading about it, when the doctor is a woman, the interruptions stop being overwhelmingly from the man to the woman. And instead, the process becomes neutralized and women interrupt men, yes, as often as men interrupt women when the doctor is a woman. Well, now we have a further complication, which is that we have men who are doing the conversation with women and feeling free to call out to women in a way that perhaps they don't feel free to call out to men. The women, however, are not welcoming this conversation at all and are in control of the situation to some degree because the man is trying to get her attention and she is reluctant to give it. He's using all the techniques he can and he's trying to get this happening. As a result of this interaction, think about what the net result is. The net result is a kind of reinforcement of gender and also of class and race. And that's what I want to get to. Every time you walk through a men's room and not a woman's room if you're a man, and every time as a woman you use the woman's room, what you're doing is reinforcing the gender distinctions. You are doing gender every time you walk into one of those rooms. If you are in a line and there's no line at the men's room, I'm now speaking to the women of the class, and you don't go in, you are ratifying the exclusion of women from having access to this resource, even when it is utterly irrational, or it might be in your mind at least, and in mine at least, to observe this distinction when there is no point in making that happen. So what are these three people doing, especially Laura and Keith, as they engage in this interaction? What Keith is doing is showing the open for business quality of women and the right of someone to do that. As opposed to, for example, if you touched a child that was right in front of its mother, the mother, I think, or the father, would take immediate and radical action, would scream. So that is just not permissible in public space. But as we walk down the streets of New York and a man calls out, and I've been there, I don't think anyone's ever called out to me, man or woman, but but the women do have that experience, and everything doesn't stop. This is not a crisis, and I never came to a woman's aid when I saw it happen. I never went up to the man who called out and said, "Don't you know that a woman is not an open person, and that we don't do that anymore in society?" I don't do that. It just goes along its merry path. And so we see that on 6th Avenue, a man can do that and no problem. We can also see that it can be a black man and no problem, a poor man and it can be no problem. All of those things can occur without much of a big deal being made. The woman is trying to scramble out of it and is using all the techniques that come with our ordinary capacity in lives to do so and to get out of this situation, but to no avail. What's happening is that in what we see, the role of women as open is being ratified. Everybody sees it, it's happening. We also see that the woman is not being nice to the man. If anyone treated you that way, whose respect you would care about, you would be offended. That is, you're giving compliments. They don't give a compliment back. You're trying to start a conversation. They don't give you the decency of participating even for a minute. And you make a request, which is, let me hold the dog, drop the leash for a minute. If a friend of yours said that, if I said that to you, you'd say, oh, sure. But in this case, she interrupts him to make clear that that is not going to happen. So what have we got going here? From the standpoint of the man, we have here another example of a privileged white woman who is rude, at least to a black man. That is what they are like. That is what they do. From the standpoint of the woman, here is what we have. We have a black poor man who talks to me in this way, who interrupts me on my way, and who doesn't take a hint. I give him clue after clue that I don't want to be here, I don't want to be talking to him. And not only does he not end the conversation by saying, well, I guess you're busy and you're on your way to someplace, he is holding the dog, my dog, and he's not giving up the dog, and in fact adds insult to injury by saying, why don't you drop the leash, which then becomes radically threatening. So now we have the problem of the threatening black man reinforced on the sidewalk. Now they each go their own ways. And what they have done is ratified the statuses and problematic statuses of each. So what they have done is analogous to going through the men's room when you're a man and going to the women's room when you're women. They have made the society up as they proceeded through it. They have reinforced the structure of society more generally, as opposed to their own statuses and their own being in it. And so, and now I want to give you some terminology to full screen. There we go. Of what this process is called in sociology and how we think about it. Sociologists have been bedeviled, and I think other people in society thinking people are also bedeviled by this problem of how it all works. What's the nature of social structure? To what degree is everything determined? To what degree is it the case that if we're born poor, that we will die poor because there is no opportunities for us? Our own agency means nothing. Now here in sociology, we can demonstrate that people who are born poor have much lower probability of going to higher education at all, much less being chosen for Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. That's just the way it is. Discrimination or processes of deprivation make that the case. But it's also the case that some poor people do indeed go on to higher education. And some people do indeed go even to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, who are born poor. So we have ways of talking about what generally is true, but we don't have ways of talking about the way in which any particular individual will undergo one particular consequence as opposed to another. That starts to highlight for us the problem that sociologists have termed the problem of structure versus agency. Agency means that human beings have agency, that things they get it in their mind to do can be done regardless of the constraints that we see statistically surround them and limit what can happen to them in their life. How do we reconcile, just at the level of ideas, structure versus agency? Well, here's a solution, one which I kind of think works. And it is a term that comes from a British sociologist who's still alive, and his name is Anthony Giddens, who is considered one of our major social theorists, not just in sociology, but across many of the fields in the social sciences. And Anthony Giddens says, wait a minute, you're looking at it falsely by putting this versus in here of structure versus agency. Instead, the way we need to look at this is that individuals, through their agency, create structure. And then those structures impose limits or influences over how human beings will work. So in other words, we make the very structures that make us. And this example that I've just given you from the streets of New York, from Denier on 6th Avenue, I meant to be an example of this process. That these people, as they sit on or walk by 6th Avenue in the case of the woman, sit on 6th Avenue in the case of the man, they are full of agency. They're deciding what to do as the situation evolves. But because of the circumstances, the fact that she is a privileged white woman in Greenwich Village, and he is not a privileged black man in Greenwich Village, the texture and tone and way they do their agencies and enact them looks different than the way you, regardless of your race or gender, do with each other as you talk and meet up here at NYU. And as they make these moves through their agency, they are reinforcing the structure, which then shapes the way agency operates at the next opportunity, the next moment. It might affect her voting behavior. And for example, and Denier interviewed Laura. It's in one of the most amazing research enterprises. He actually tracked her down later and did full-on interviews with her to find out what she made of that scene. And this is some years ago when New York was more disorderly than it is now. And she talked about, although she was a liberal and she hated saying it and hated doing it, she actually understood Mayor Giuliani's cracking down on the street vendors and all of that source of disorder. So here we have a liberal person who, out of these kinds of experiences, has a political opinion that is shaped in one direction as opposed to another. The consequence is that she, like I'm sure many of you, when you see someone coming up to you and asking you for money, maybe get a little bit tense. And of course, nowadays, I find the beggars of New York to be overwhelmingly well-behaved compared certainly to the way they used to be, and indeed compared to many people I know. They are extremely well-behaved. But still, a set of experiences like this generates that kind of tension and that kind of expectation, or from both parties' standpoint, that as well as political behavior. Here, this liberal woman is now sympathetic to Mayor Giuliani, who otherwise she is opposed to on many grounds. And so she supports his policies, which then come down as new structures, which will limit what the men can do, whether they can set up their carts, what kind of civil liberties they will have vis-a-vis the police, and all the rest of it. So do you see how this works? That's the very important idea, is how agency creates structure as structure creates agency. And Giddens has a term for this. He makes it a verb. He calls it structuration. That's what he does. It's a process. This is not versus. It's not structure versus agency anymore, but rather it's a single process that he calls structuration. And you could even make a verb out of it and say that these two women, Keith and Laura, are structurating. And indeed, that's what we all do every minute, no time out, is we are structurating, creating the very structures that create us. I'll update you on Anthony Giddens. Anthony Giddens went on to become the director of the London School of Economics. I'd say even though a sociologist, but that isn't all that rare at all. And he is a British lord. So when you think about him and the idea of structuration, if you think it's like not all that great an idea, let me tell you, you can get a lordship out of it. And so it's in a sense the biggest idea we've ever had in sociology.